Hey everyone! In today's video, we will be walking through how I built this entire platformer game from start to finish using nothing but AI. And this includes everything that you see on the screen, such as the animations, the music, the gameplay, the UI elements, and most importantly, I'll be showing you how you can get this working on your mobile device as well, which includes virtual joysticks and buttons that will allow you to play this completely on your phone. I'll be walking you through step by step from start to finish how I started off with this AI generated mock-up of the game. So this is not even a real game. Extracted out all of the assets that I wanted to be able to put into the game, generated the UI elements, the parallax backgrounds, as well as the characters, animating them, and then getting it all integrated using Phaser. This even includes an entire level editor so that you can customize exactly how you want your levels to look. So if you've ever wanted to know how to make your own games using AI, as well as having it be able to run on mobile devices with touch controls, this video is for you. If you want to get hold of the resources for this tutorial, including this cheat sheet over here and the exact prompts that I use to build this game, you can check it out in the links in the description below. If you want to take things a step further, definitely check out gamedev.com. This is my all-in-one toolkit for everything related to AI game development. You will be able to find things like specialized agent skills for game dev, including a full step-by-step written version of today's tutorial, as well as the full source code. There's also a private Discord community where you can hang out with other AI game development vibe coders. Now, without further ado, let's get started with today's tutorial. So we'll be going through today's game to see how we build this entire game step by step. And the aim of the game is quite simple. You just have to pick up all of these coins and then you have to avoid the enemies or you have to battle them, as you can do over here. Okay, and once you pick up all the coins, you will enter this portal. And one thing to highlight, as I've mentioned before, this game is fully playable on mobile devices as well. So you can move around and you can also make use of the jump buttons and the attack buttons that are touchscreen compatible. Perfect. So let's go through everything step by step so you'll know how to go about building this game for yourself. From step one, what I did was have this image that we have over here as inspiration. And this is not a gameplay footage. This is entirely AI generated. This was just a mock-up that I asked it to build. So you can actually see what I did over here. I said use Codex's image gen skill, which is inbuilt into the Codex app, to create 4 mockups that could serve well to visualize a 2D platformer starter scene. Usually this is what I like to do. The whole aim here is to just get some ideas, and I like to have 4 different mockups. And out of the 4 different images that were generated, I decided to go with this one. And the reason for it is that I like the style. I felt that it was going to be quite compatible for a game. And I knew that this would be simplified enough for us to be able to create assets from. So one thing I wanted to mention here is that you might want to add this into your prompts as well, which is keep things very simple. Reachable platforms should not have too much depth and should be standalone. Use a fixed number of platform types and imagine you have a fixed Atlas tile set. And the idea here is that you don't want it to come up with a mockup that ends up being too complicated, that looks nice visually, but is too difficult to implement into a game. So like I said, this is the final version that I ended up with, and I'm really happy with this result. So once you've gotten this mockup, the idea here is that you want to split this up into an atlas of images. An atlas is effectively a gigantic image that has your individual elements, like your props, your platforms, your characters, all separated out into individual parts. And the reason why you do this versus having individual images is that if you're trying to draw individual images onto the screen, it is quite computationally intensive. But if you have it all in one texture image like this, it's going to have one single image, and then when it needs this, it will just draw this portion or draw that portion, and it's a lot more efficient. Okay, and so the prompt that I used over here is I said use image gen once again to create a chroma atlas of assets used by this mockup. And I said I want all the whole platforms that can be placed, and I want repeatable tiles that can be tiled as well. And after that, once you have the initial one, you can say make a transparent version, and because the image gen skill actually has a background removal tool as well. And you can see immediately that because you've asked for the platforms and tiles for it to be simple, you can imagine building up the scene that you see over here out of the elements that you see in the atlas. And that's a very useful starting point. And the idea here is to make sure that you are able to get a mockup that can actually be implemented into a game. Now that you've got your atlas, the next thing that you want to do is that you want to start generating some UI elements as well. And this is useful to do at this stage because you've got your mockup and you've got your assets, and it's a great time to have consistent assets. So you can see these are all of the UI elements that I generated, and I wanted to have a health bar. I wanted the health bar to have different colors based on how much health was remaining, and I also wanted to have these different portraits of the character depending on how much health was left. I wanted collectibles UI as well, and some additional icons that will be useful. And so you can see that the prompt that I used over here, I said based on image 1, let's use image gen to generate UI elements that we can have of the game. And this image 1 here would be the mockup that we provide, that we were mentioning from before. And I said that I wanted a player portrait and health bar that is dynamically filled. So that means that it changes based on how much health is left. And then I said I want variants of the portraits: healthy, hurt, worn out, and defeated. And I did this funny emoji. And he managed to understand that. And then I said we also should consider how to show the coin collections. So you can see this worked very well, and the Image 2.0 model is really good at understanding and dealing with game assets. So this is what it came up with. One of the things to mention is that I did say for both atlases, let's have a manifest.json that outlines the names and bounds. And the idea here is that as it generates these atlases, having a manifest will help to automatically determine which one is at which portion of the atlas without you having to spend a second step to do it later. So it will be able to say, hey, there's one portrait here, one portrait there, one portrait here, and automatically split up this image for you in a JSON file. So that's the UI that you've done. And so let's look back at our mockup once again. One thing that you will notice is that as I iterated upon the mockup, I did say I wanted to have a background that would serve as parallax. So parallax effect is something which I'll show you over here. I'm going to the background test scene, and you can see here, by having your backgrounds split up into different layers and moving at different speeds, it gives you a sense of depth when you are scrolling through the scene. And I'll show you how this works over here. So I can toggle this medium layer off, I can toggle the far one off, and I can toggle the foreground one off as well. So you can see this is made up of 3 different layers. And I've done this for my other project in my last video as well. And it's a very similar approach. One thing that I've done slightly different this time is that I do have a foreground parallax, and this helps to give a very nice effect, as you will see over here. So I'm just going to play maybe this one, and you can see that the foreground is in front of the game. So it moves at a very fast speed, and it just adds a lot of depth. All right, so how do we go about doing this parallax? So what we have to say here is that we want to have 3 layers, okay? A far, medium, and foreground layer at the correct resolution. We always want to specify that these layers should not interfere with the main game. Let me just show you what I did in order to get this working over here. So I said, make use that the colors used in far and medium are lighter so as to not clash with what we do in the main game. And the foreground should also be of a different hue, not to distract from the main game, but should sit in front between the main game and the camera. And use image generation to create these images. Remember to have your opacity so that they can be layered on top of each other, and not to have any artifacts floating in the middle. So if I jump into here, you can see this is the far one. So it's going to sit right at the back. Then you have this foreground one that will sit right in the front, and this one would be in the middle. Because it's transparent, you can lay them on top of one another. This will therefore give you the effect that you can see in this portion of the game, where things move at different speed and you can have different parallax effects. So that's that one done. And now you have parallax backgrounds. Once you have these parallax backgrounds, what you want to do is then ask it to create a test gem where it lays all of it down together, and then ask it to auto scroll it so that you can make sure that everything works correctly. So this is the background test gem. The idea here is that you can test to make sure that everything is aligned properly. So for example, if I wanted the far one to be slightly higher, I can move it such that it is more visible in the background. Okay. And if you've seen from my other tutorials, I always say that you want to have it such that it saves all of your configurations into a JSON file, so that if you refresh and you now play, this game now has picked up the changes that you saw, and it will persist it throughout all your different sessions. We've got our background, we've got our platforms. The next thing I wanted to talk about was how I got hold of these characters over here. Now, I won't go into too much detail because I actually have several videos where I walk through how I go about using image generation to create art assets for my game. But the idea here is that you want to basically provide a source reference, and it's very easily available because I have the source references as generated from the earlier step. So I have the player here as well as the enemy. You want to create an anchor image that represents what your character looks like. And then from there, you use an image to video model like Grok Imagine to do the animations and split up the animations into frames. I've actually created a tool called Spriterific, which does follow these automatically for you. So for example, you can see if I click over here, new sprite, I can type in the kind of sprite that I want, whether it's a tiny wizard character or a male fighter character. In the case of our game, what I did was that I supplied the source image that you see over here. And then I said, get a west-facing anchor with no snap, which means that I'm not going to do any form of pixel snapping. And then I say, using this character reference v2 that we have over here. And so what it will do is that it'll take this source image and then it will process it, get it ready to be put into image generation as a source reference. And then the output will come up with something like this, which is what we want for our platformer. So this will form the anchor for our animation step, because once we have this, it's very simple. We can just ask Grok Imagine to animate this character to perform all of the different animations. And because it's a platformer, you don't really need to bother about any other animation directions. So in Spriterific, what you can do is you can then, given an image like this, and you can use some of the presets that we have over here for platformers. So you can see here what it's going to do is going to take this anchor. And then I say, I want to generate west-facing platformer animations for this character. Idle, loop, run, jump, crouch, attack, hurt, and death. And then I said, preserve the canvas and keep loop cycling where appropriate. And this will make use of Grok Imagine. And I always suggest using 1 to 2 seconds for your duration of your animations. And then once you click on animate, what you will end up with is a bunch of animations like this. The first round of animations are really, really good. So they have your death animation, you have your jump, you have your hurt, you have your punch, and then this was the idle that it came up with, which I fixed up later because it was moving too much. And then you have your walk, and then you have your run. And so as part of this tool, it allows you to regenerate new animations. So you can see here, I ask it to regenerate the idle animation and specify a different prompt. I added additional prompt context to prevent it from moving around and to focus on just a breathing motion. Okay? And the great thing about Spriterific is that oftentimes when you generate things from video, you will have frames that you don't need. So there is a frame picker tool here, which allows you to quickly select the frames that you want. So that if you see any odd frames, you can just drop them. The other nice thing is that it has this useful tool for walk cycle handling, where you can just say, I want this as my start frame. And then you mark this as start. And then you mark something else as your end frame. And then you just ask it to fill it with the number of frames that you want in total. And when you play it, this will automatically give you the result that you want. The other thing that you can do in most cases is that sometimes you have drifting between the frames. In this case, you can see it's perfectly aligned. But if you ever have a drift like this, that might cause problems, you can just fix it up in this way. And then you save and export, and then you will get the results that you want. So this is what I did for the player character, as well as the orc character that you see over here. Spriterific is an internal tool that has been built just for myself, mostly. But I do recognize that this is a workflow that a lot of people might find useful. So if you're interested to learn more about it and stay up to date with it, you can head on over to spriterific.com and you can subscribe for updates. This will also put you onto my AI-oriented insiders list, where you will get other vibe coding and game development tips as part of my weekly newsletter as well. I'm going to jump into my assets over here. All of them will be as sprite sheets that you can import into your game. And this sprite sheet will work for any game engine. This is a very standard format that everybody uses in order to get animations into your game. Once you've gotten it, the way I like to do it is I always like to create something called a character gym. The whole point of the character gym is so that you can assess that your animations are looking correctly, and allows you to do things like collision detections, bounds, and a lot of different tweaks to make sure that everything works in your game correctly. Creating this gym is really important. If you've seen my other videos, I always create separate gyms for different aspects of the development so that you have a way to slowly integrate your assets into your game. So the prompt that I use for this is, once I've gotten these assets, update the index.json with the character sprite sheet information. And then I say that I want to create a character gym. I want this to be able to load the character in and preview every animation with playback controls, playback speed, showing which frame is playing, collision bounds. And what you end up with is something like this. And this is important because if you're doing something like a punch animation, you want to ensure that you can see every single frame, but you also want the attack portion to only be activated when the hand is out, not the entire duration of the animation. Otherwise, you have strange behavior where you start the punching animation, but before the hand comes out, you see the enemy take damage. The same thing with your collision bounce that you can see over here. So you don't want it such that when it just touches his hand a little bit, and then it registers as a collision. You want to have collision that you can have control over. You can see the same thing with the orc here. And I'm going to play his attack. And you can see the attack only comes up when his sword is out and doesn't register when the sword has not yet completed the swinging motion. All right, so that's how we handle the characters in the game. Now you want to be able to inspect what is going on with each of the tiles that have been generated as part of your image generation step. You have these different elements, but you want to make sure that you can preview how it will look like in the game. Having this is very useful because sometimes you will want your collision bounce to not be directly at the top. And I'll show you why. So if I do this for the long one as well as this one here, okay, and I'm just going to save the bounce. And now I'm going to reload the game and go into the playground. You will see that my character is floating above the grass. Okay, so it's really important to get your bounce correct. Otherwise, you will have effect like this. And that's the reason why you want to have your tile gym so you can adjust your collision bounce. So you usually want it to be slightly lower so that you have the sense that his shoes are going into the grass. So that's what you can do. And I'm just going to fix this up now. Go back into the playground and you can see it's looking a lot better now. So the other thing that you want to do is that you want to create a level editor. So all you have to do is say, I want a dedicated playground level. And then you want to have a level editor that allows us to construct, edit, and save the level and persist it so that you can save it to file. And then you want gizmos, and I'll explain what they are, but this will allow you to place things very easily. And then you want to have debug panels that will show and categorize the different props that you have. I also added in with a small preview of the prop. This was very important because in my last video, I didn't have this and I had very little idea of what I was placing down. A few other things that you want to add is that you want to have a spawn location so you can set where the player starts. And you want to make sure that the changes are saved. I'm going to show you the level editor for this guy over here. So I'm going to go to level editor and you can see this is for the first level. I'm going to switch this to the editor playground. And this is what I was telling you about. So you can see this is the player start. So just for fun, I'm going to start the player maybe over here so we can see the changes later. You can see this one's a bit off, so I'm going to move it left. I have snapping enabled or disabled, so that allows me to shift things ever so slightly if I want to do something for the props. And this gizmo makes it easier to move things around rather than changing the value over here, which sometimes is hard to get to where you want it to be. And I'm going to save and play it. You can see my starting location is now over here. This shows you that the level editor is working correctly. So now you have your level editor and your props. Now you pretty much have everything to go ahead and create more levels and different progressions as well. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the heads-up display or HUD or UI. And because we already did this earlier, we can just integrate this into the game using AI. So let's add health to the player enemies. Enemies have 3 health, player has 5. The orc's health is displayed as a health bar above him, but the player's health is displayed using and this is the UI atlas that you pass in. We want to integrate this into the assets JSON index. And then we want the transparent portion to deplete and be based on the health. And so this is exactly what happens. So I'm going to walk to the orc over here and let him hit me. And you would just pay attention to the top left-hand corner. All right, you can see that each time he hits, my health starts to deplete. And if you also notice, the character portrait changes as well, which is part of the prompt that I asked it to do. And so this is how you can do it. Once you've got this, the AI is now really good at understanding how to make use of UI elements. So I was actually very surprised that it was able to get the depletion bars working correctly as well. I thought that it'll have to struggle with some line slicing or whatever, but it was actually able to get this working. It's a little bit naive in how it does it, but it serves very well for what we're doing in the game. So now you have your UI, you pretty much have a playground with your entire game. And this is effectively a working game. You have an end condition. You have your player that can move around. You have your enemies that can attack you. All you need to do is set some kind of win condition. We already have our lose condition when we get our health depleted. What I did was I simply said that when I collect all coins, the portal is open and that allows me to enter it and the game ends. But then once you have this main playground, you have all the elements, you can go ahead and create a bunch of new levels. And then you can just use your level editor to just go through and fix things up. and make things a little bit more customized. As you can see over here, I asked it to make sure that it locks a level until it's completed. So you have to pass level 1 first, and then move on to the next level. And then you will be able to just progress through this, and gives you a sense of progression. And because you have a level editor, you can add more and more levels to this as time goes by. So that's pretty much the main things related to how I got this game done. As you can see, it's a very simple process, and it's the same process that I take whenever I'm working with any one of my games. The key thing here is to recognize that you do things step by step. And the main thing that you want to take away from this is to make sure that you have gyms to test things out, to make sure that things look visually correct. Don't try to ask AI to get all of this collision bounds correct for you. Don't try to ask AI to fix all these frames and everything for you. Get the tools in, and then you can debug what's going on, and then you can customize things as you wish. Now, the final thing that I wanted to talk about is how I got this running on a simulator, as you see here, with touch controls. And this is really simple to do. And the way that you do it is that you make use of something called Capacitor. And this is all that you need in order to get this working on iOS, simulator, or device. And I have a skill that helps to automate this process. I'll show you what I did over here, is that I just said, hey, study the existing skill that I have. And then I ask it to make sure that it matches what we're doing with this 2D game. With that, I was able to come up with a phaser version of this skill that then allowed me to deploy this on the device with a single prompt. And the only things that I needed to do, which I'll show you over here, is that you will find that sometimes the UI is occluded. So you can see here, the health, the character UI was actually not fitting within the screen. So what I did was that I said, like, make sure to align all of the UI elements such that they appear on screen. And then the other thing that you want to do after that is to have touch controls. And I was quite specific in what I wanted over here. The touch controls, I said, we now need virtual joysticks and buttons. I want it to be placement insensitive. So this means that I don't have to exactly press in a specific area. I can press anywhere on the screen near the lab and it will work. I said I wanted the right-hand side to have virtual buttons for jumping and up. And then I wanted debug panels that allows me to test this on my laptop as well. So I could just turn on touch controls to make sure everything is working fine. So I don't have to always keep the point in order to think this well. I did say that for the joystick, I wanted it such that if I do it slightly, it walks. And then if I hold longer, it will cause the player to run. And with Capacitor, this just works right off the bat. You probably will need to have installed Xcode and the Xcode CLI tool. But then once you install it once, it will know exactly what to do. I just pointed the skill to this and then asked it to build for iOS. And it was able to get it up and running in the first try. All right, so that's it for today's video. I hope it's been informative and helpful. Like I said, this entire process that you see over here is the exact workflow that I've been using for almost all of my games for a very long time now. And hopefully you've also seen that it's really simple to get your game up and running. You don't need a lot of complex concepts. And with the image generation models and the video generation models, you are more than enough to create your assets for your game as well. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so that you will always be the first to know when new content like this drops. If you want to learn more about Spriterific, check out the link in the description below. And if you haven't seen my other video where I built a steampunk platformer from scratch, you want to check out this video over here. All right, till next time, I'll see ya.